everyone, and welcome. We're here at the Google Plus Hangout. My name's Elizabeth Albright, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the PRSA Digital Impact Conference, which is going to be happening the 2nd and 3rd of April next week. That's next Monday and Tuesday in New York. For those of you who aren't aware, PRSA is the Public Relations Society of America. With 21,000 members, it is the largest organization of communications and PR professionals in the States. And each year that puts together this conference called Digital Impact, which is designed to bring together PR, communications, and social media professionals to learn from each other and to hear from the experts about what's happening in this incredibly fast-changing and dynamic field. This year, PRSA's Digital Impact is co-presented by PRSA, the technology section for PRSA, represented by Kevin Sangsland, who's here with us today, and the Society for New Communications Research, of which I am a founding fellow. Now, this year, the Digital Impact Conference theme is Influence and Persuasion. We're going back to look at some of the fundamentals of communication and seeing how they both changed and not changed in the face of all of this new technology. And we have some really fantastic keynoters, one of whom is here with us today, who we're going to hear from. We'd like to welcome Timothy Jordan, who is the developer advocate at Google. In this role, he works with publishers and media companies to help them get the most out of the Google Plus platform. And I don't know about you, but I'm very excited to hear and learn more about this platform. I've had an opportunity myself to play with it a little bit, and I think it has some tremendous potential. So we're going to have a great opportunity here to learn about engagement and how brands can engage using Google Plus straight from the source from Timothy. So with no further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Kevin Sangsland to get the conversation started.
Sure. Thanks, Elizabeth. Well, Timothy, I suspect you get this question a lot, but certainly for PR professionals, whether you're working in the technology industry or not, time is a limited resource, and so, why Google Plus?
So that's a really excellent question, and I've heard it before. I think there's a couple things to look at. Let me give the big view first, and this is going to be obvious to us and a lot of our audience, but I think it's worth saying that relationships and sharing and identity are really an important part of the web. And as Google looks at new ways to center our products around the millions of people that use them every day, bringing these people into the project and focusing on who they are and knowing who they are allows us to improve those services that we offer to them. And a great example of this is a new search experience that we released recently, where people can see their photos and Google Plus posts and web pages in Google search. This improvement across all of our products by adding people to them is something that we care very deeply about, and we think it's a really an improvement in our service for these users. So as Google Plus as a product, it's about focusing on people, and that's sort of the important thing there. For communications professionals, when you look at all the different ways that you can reach your audience, you're going to look at different avenues and different styles of speaking to your audience. And for example, you might have display advertising in real life on a billboard, and that's a great way to communicate in one way. And then you'll use social networks to sort of communicate with people on a more personal level. I think when you look at Google Plus, the ways that you can communicate with people are interesting and new and very intimate and detailed. For example, when you speak to your followers on Google+, you show up in their stream along with all of their other friends. You're a part of their everyday experience. Then when you try and reach them through something like Hangouts, you get that sort of personal one-on-one experience. And then finally, we make a lot of platform tools available so that you can push content into their stream such that they can share it with their other friends, so that they can connect with each other around your content. And because of those avenues that we've really focused on, I think it's a really powerful way to connect with users.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. What have you seen from businesses I guess the use of Google Plus by PR practitioners. What are you seeing out there in terms of successful use of that?
That's a great question, and I've seen some really great uses of Google Plus. Here's an interesting thing, is that Google Plus is a different way to communicate with users. So I'm going to talk about sort of the bad way to use Google Plus and to light up the ways that seem successful. The bad way is to treat Google Plus like your other networks or your other avenues of communication to users. An example of this is I've seen some publishers and PR professionals take communication from another service and just copy and paste it into Google Plus. And when that happens, from the outset, users are generally just not engaged. They never sort of kickstart it with that entity on Google+. However, when publishers and PR professionals engage on Google+ in sort of a detailed and a conversational way, you see a lot of engagement. Now, and the example here is a sort of a short post and a link somewhere. That doesn't do terribly well on Google+. But a conversation starter, a rich post that includes perhaps an image and a link and a question for the audience, will get you comments, providing new content that's hard to find somewhere else with a clear description and engagement for the user is going to get you a lot of reshares and +1s. So I guess the thing for Google Plus to remember is to engage with your audience at that sort of rich conversational level and actually putting in the time. And then the last thing is to come back and prune that tree. With a lot of mediums, it feels like broadcast. You put a post out there and you just let it go. With Google+, it's important to come back and engage in the content. You don't need to do it consistently. In fact, sometimes inconsistently makes sense, oddly enough, is that sometimes you come back and you engage on the post, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you engage in the post a lot, right? Sometimes on a Tuesday, you'll start a Hangout. Sometimes it's on a Thursday. So that you're sort of engaging with your audience in that casual and conversational way as well.
All right. Well, do we have time to take some questions from the audience? Or Elizabeth, did you have something that's related to this? I mean, it sounds to me like there's a lot of potential here.
Sorry, why don't we give an opportunity for a couple questions?
Might be on mute.
Yeah, I just fixed it. Sorry. We're learning the new technology here. Are there any questions specific to engagement from the audience that we can take? And if not, we'll go on to the next subject. But perhaps there's something there.
A little bit. I think we should give our audience a little bit more time to ask some comments on the thread, and maybe just stay in here for a few more minutes. Do either of you have additional questions that we can talk about while we're here?
Yeah, I would very much like to ask a question now. I teach at the Paris School of Business and the Institut Supérieur de Communication here in Paris. And I actually teach a class on brand monitoring and trying to listen to what brands are saying online and to measure the levels of engagement. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how we might be able to do that with Google+.
That's a great question. There's a lot of ways to measure your activity on Google+, and one of my favorite things about that is that you can measure sort of per post. Now, this is important for PR professionals, especially when you're learning a tool, because you get to see when you make a certain kind of post, what kind of engagement you get. Because users can reshare your post, they can +1 your post, and they can comment on your post. Right? And all those represent different things. When they reshare, they want to take your content and share it to their audience. And so you get greater reach. When they +1, it's a casual gesture of endorsement. It's a recognition beyond just sort of reading the post. But it's not the deeper engagement of a comment. When they make a comment, they're engaging around your material. Right? They're having a conversation either with you or with other people that are also interested in your material. And then, so you can see each of these things on the post, which is really interesting, right? And with the Public Data Read API, you can actually automate this a little bit so that you can see your data over time. All that is really interesting. You see that right in the stream. One of my favorite tools, and something that I'm really excited about, is ripples. Now, the best way to try out ripples is go down your stream till you see what's hot. You click on that little triangle and view your ripples. And what you actually see is a visualization of the reach and engagement on your content. You can see who reshared it and who reshared their posts, right? So you also get to see your top contributors and the people most engaged with your content. And that kind of data, being able to see that in such a visual way per post, I think is really interesting.
I have to imagine, Timothy, that has some pretty practical applications from a measurement standpoint for communication professionals, marketing professionals. How does that, does that relate to the search experience as well? I mean, I think a lot of people that would, come to our conference or watch the watch the Hangout today would probably, get questions from time to time regarding SEO as well. So is there an advantage from a comms standpoint to Google Plus from a search algorithm standpoint?
Yeah, actually, let me address that question in two ways. First off, measurement, right? And it's important to remember that Google Plus is not just a URL. It's not just a stream. It's not just any one feature. Google Plus is Google adding people across all of our products and services, right? And with the Google Plus platform, allowing you to do that as well, allowing web pages outside of Google to add people to their products and services. And there's a number of plugins that we make available for this kind of thing, like the brand badge, the personal badge for authors, and the Plus One button. And the Plus One button is an interesting plugin that allows your audience to give sort of a simple gesture of approval or endorsement of your content wherever it is on the web. They just hit that button, and what happens is that their friends, their contacts, will see personal annotations in search when appropriate. So my friend Ryan Plus One's a roller derby tournament webpage, right? And when I'm searching for roller derby the next day, I see that he's Plus One that page right there in search. I see his face and I see his name, and that's meaningful to me. So that's the function of it. But we also make measurement tools available to see how many people are plus oneing, the sort of people that are plus oneing, where they're from, and other demographic data once the plus ones are large enough that we can anonymize that. In Webmaster Tools, we'll also show you your search uplift, your increase in click-through rate for a link that's been annotated by search. And in Google Analytics, we'll show you activity on the Plus One button as well as other social gestures from other services. That's the measurement, and so you can see sort of the user engagement both on Google Plus and on your website around these services. Now, to address your question, this is meaningful in search in two ways. One, it affects the appearance of search, right? When people see my friends, or when people see their friends' names and faces next to a search result, that's really meaningful to them. In fact, on ads, we see a 5 to 10% lift on click-through rate on desktop Google.com search ads when they're displayed with social annotations. That is, I see an ad and I see Ryan's face and name on there, I'm 5 to 10% more likely to click on it. And that's really significant when you think of click-through rates on ads. The other thing is that Plus One is a signal that we can use in our search rank algorithm. I think that was a pretty long-winded answer to a short question, but Plus One is something I feel really passionate about.
Well, I think it's very relevant to anyone who is responsible for particularly an integrated marketing or communications program, and there are more of us these days, I think, as the industry continues to evolve. What are your thoughts on that, Elizabeth?
Oh, I agree. One thing that
Elizabeth is muted again.
No, I'm back. It just takes a moment.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, the boundaries, of course, between public relations, between marketing, communications, all of these things start to blur together, and then we start to look at how it's affecting customer relationship management and some of the other interesting business units and so forth in companies. So one question that's been I've been thinking about is how might we use something like Google Plus across our different business strategies in a cross-channel fashion, perhaps even for internal, external audiences. I mean, it seems like it might be a powerful tool to use to reach our multiple audiences today, which are only both increasing and becoming more fragmented.
So that's really interesting. And the thing is, with Google Plus, any user can share with circles. And that's also true for Google Plus pages. Now, I mentioned before this tool, Ripples, where you can sort of identify some of your top contributors. One of the great action items you can pull out of that, once you've identified those users, you can put them in a circle, right? And you can give them extra things to encourage that deep relationship that they have with you. And you can do this with other forms of your audience as well. You can put them in circles and you can address them specifically. And this is really important when you think of a very large brand that has lots of products, right, and lots of different topics to communicate to the world. You don't necessarily want to give that content to everybody all at once. It can feel overwhelming, but you can segment that with circles.
I can see some pretty, big implications for the technology industry. It's a fairly common thing to sell through a channel of some sort in technology. Obviously, the context of information that's given to a business partner that represents your product is going to need to look and feel a little bit different than what's targeting the end customer, so to speak. So something like Circle seems to me to have some advantages. Would you agree?
I'm sorry, I missed that last part about circles.
Well, the aspect of circles to be able to kind of group individual communities, by context, essentially. I would think from, in the technology industry, just, to give our audience an example, software companies very often sell through a channel of business partners, system integrators, VARs, things of that nature. You need to communicate with those business partners, but I think the nature of the content that you would use needs to look slightly different than, what you would use to communicate with your end customer. Something like Circles that allows you to break people up in communities into different contexts, I think would make that conversation somewhat efficient, but all on a same, single platform.
And in a way, being able to use Circles in a single Google Plus entity makes this feel a lot more natural, right? One of my favorite things about Google Plus pages is that I can take a brand and put it in a circle with people associated with that same topic. Now, that seems a little abstract, but think about this. I really like to run, and I have a running circle. And I have my running teammates that I go out and run with in that running circle. But I also have the people that make the things that help me run in that circle as well. People who make my shoes or my headphones or my running applications, so that when I'm thinking about running, I get to see all that together. And that's pretty neat when you think about a brand, and I can follow this large brand, and I happen to be a reseller, and I get that communication from that brand, as well as the public communication with that brand, in whatever context in which I wish to view that. Should we take a question from the post? Let's see what we got. I believe there's somebody who says, Jessica says, with measurement, can you measure how many active versus passive followers you have? And that's a really interesting question on Google+, mostly because I don't know many passive Google+ users. Right? It's interesting. You do run across users every once in a while that don't appear to have many public posts. But the great thing about Google+ is you can share privately. 2/3 of posts people make are with circles, right? And so what I actually found is that the people that I know always are really very active and engaged on the content. That said, think about it less as active versus passive, and more is in different kinds of engagement. Now, I mentioned there's sort of the three things you can do on the post. You can +1, you can share, and you can comment. And all those sort of represent different things. And I think they represent different goals for a PR professional. A share is greater reach. A +1 adds reputation to that post. And comments are an aspect of users engaging around that content where it is. Yeah. So, for example, we have a very large photography community, and typically photograph posts receive tons of comments. And it's interesting, if you look at some of the really well-known photographers on Google+, most of the comments aren't them. And in fact, they might respond once or twice, but most of these comments are photography enthusiasts, right? People really interested in f-stop and lens type and all this stuff, connecting with each other over this photograph. And so that's audience engagement. And then the more reshares, the more that's happening everywhere else. And I think what you can do as a PR professional, I've mentioned this before, is once you write that post and you revisit it and you see the kinds of engagement you're getting based on the kind of content you gave, right? Look at the different kinds of engagement for a video that no one's seen before versus, a non-sequitur thought about your brand, right? It's going to be very sort of different, and it'll really depend on your brand exactly what that looks like. Do we want to take Kevin and Elizabeth while I'm looking at this post? Questions? I think we have time for a couple more.
Okay, I actually have a kind of an existential question, if you will. What I've noticed is this is a very non-linear way of putting together. You talk about ripples and you talk about circles. If you look at your description of your keynote, you talk about the way Google Plus is going to affect our identity on the web. And I was wondering if you could think out loud a little bit, if you will, about this idea of a very nonlinear, circular grouping of identities. And you talking with we have these different circles that we're part of and represented both ourselves and with our brands. I'm completely fascinated by this idea, and if you could indulge me for just a couple of minutes to talk about it, I'd appreciate it.
Of course. What I think is most interesting about Google+, and this is sort of a story I told when I was speaking about Google+, just after we launched, is that it feels natural to me. And this is personally me, I stopped sharing online, or at least I was doing a lot less, because my option was I could share with the whole world, or no one. Right, and this sort of grouping of like everyone and no one is not what my life is like. I have friends that I spend Friday night with, and then I have friends that I've never seen in the last year, and then I have friends that I had in high school, and I communicate with these three groups very differently. Right, I don't send them the same information. I don't share with them the same things. But with Google+, it's like sharing in real life. I get to have those circles. I get to have my friend circle that I can share a daily photo with, right? I don't have to share that with everybody that I knew at one point in my life. And I don't have to share it with the public. And so when you think about that, when you think about, your real life, it's nonlinear. Not only do I have these different circles, they change over time. That's why circles are so easy to update and add and remove people to. Is that for one day I have a friend that I'm seeing like every week, and then they move to Japan and I never see them. And I don't have the same relationship with them. It's a long distance pen pal relationship. It's different. So I think that's interesting. But the other thing that I'd like to add is this idea of determinacy. And I think that's one thing with Google Plus and the Google Plus platform that I think we've done really, really well is when you add certain kinds of structure markup to your web page and a user shares that on Google+, you know exactly what the thumbnail, the title, and the description are going to look like. Which means you as a publisher get to say how your post or how a conversation around your content gets started. And then on the post, seeing these numbers and these different kinds of engagement gets you the information that you need to be able to navigate these waters, as even if they are a bit nonlinear.
I think your last point there is very relevant, given the transition that all social networks, I think, have kind of created, and the challenges that have created for communicators and brands in general is that you used to have this top-down mentality, and you told the consumer or customer what to think in many ways. I mean, you controlled the message. Today, it's very much almost a shared responsibility between you and your communities. The best thing you can do, I think, is to give your consumers the tools to communicate the brand in the way that at least you see it. And I think your point about configuring your website to work well with the network is an apt one. I think you also touched a little bit on something that I personally have had challenges with, in terms of the amount of information that can be created by the networks, particularly if you're a highly connected individual, and most communicators, I think, are and have to be. And so you had mentioned Derby earlier. My wife's a member of the Detroit Derby League, and they're a very active community. And because I have a couple of connections there, a lot of that content tends to fill up my streams in other platforms, if you will. And so I can see, even just from a management standpoint, circles being a good way to manage different communities, even if you've got a niche community that might not communicate that often, but when they do with a sense of urgency. Have you seen that from brands that you've worked with?
See, you mentioned Derby, and I do want to mention I announced roller derby here in California. And so I know what you mean. Roller derby is a super active community. And something that I think is interesting is that I actually communicate with Derby all the time online, but you wouldn't necessarily see that from all my public posts, because a lot of them I scope to a team or a league or all my Derby friends. In fact, typically when I'm announcing a game, I bring up the Messenger app on Google Plus on my mobile phone, and I bring in my Derby circle, and I give them score updates. And all Derby games happen on a Saturday night, so at the same time, I'm getting score updates of every game, across the nation. And I think that's really interesting. But my friends who are not interested in Derby, that maybe they're spending their Saturday afternoon watching golf, they don't have to be polluted by that score, right? They can keep on the course. Sorry, the last part of your question, I think I missed.
Well, I think it was so there's a that's a personal nuance, but I think the experience is equally apt, or you come across it in your professional life as well, where there are aspects of maybe your internal network and your colleagues that you work with, they tend to produce a lot of content, and there tend to be a lot of them that you're connected with. That can overshadow maybe really important external information that's coming from a customer group or something like that. And I can see, or at least it would seem to me, that you must be working with some brands where they're taking steps to organize those key communities that are important to them in ways that allows them to manage some of that information overload.
Yeah, and again, the answer here is circles, right? By focusing on circles, you can sort of segment your audience. Also, here is notifications, right? And notifications are sort of a transparent feature of Google Plus, because we all use them, but you don't always notice that you're using them. There is that red number or that red box with a white number in it at the top of your screen that tells you the different notifications that you're getting and how many you have up in your queue. And my experience is that I go on my stream at random times during the day, and I see stuff, and it's sort of like the serendipity of the stream. Sometimes I see content, and sometimes I don't. But then I always check my notifications. So if somebody felt strongly enough to call me out personally in a post with a plus mention, or they're replying to a post that I made, or they're commenting on a post that I commented on, all of these things I see in the notification. And so the conversations I'm part of, or I need to be part of, I can continue doing that while I'm also finding fun cat photos at the same time, right? But even further, like the conversations that you're not getting a notification about, but maybe you should be involved in, once you identify those top contributors and those key influencers for your product and your brand, and you put them in a circle, you can check in with that circle every day. And you can look at that circle, and that's a filtered view of your stream where you're just looking at that community. So you really have the control to sort of segment the world out there and view it how you want. And with that, we're just about out of time. So, are there some ending remarks that you'd like to make before we get going?
Well, I wanted to thank you very much for participating with us and for speaking at our conference. We really look forward to meeting you in person in a few days. And I hope that those in the audience who will be there will also come and say hi. And between now and then, happy travels.
Thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it on Tuesday. We'll see you all then.
All right. Thanks again, Timothy.